The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Adventure 1, A Scandal in Bohemia. To Sherlock Holmes, she is always the woman. I have seldom heard him mention her under any other name. In his eyes, she eclipses and predominates the whole of her sex. It was not that he felt any emotion akin to love for Irene Adler. All emotions, and that one particularly, were abhorrent to his cold, precise but admirably balanced mind. He was, I take it, the most perfect reasoning and observing machine that the world has seen. But as a lawyer, he would have placed himself in a false position. He never spoke of the softer patients, save with a give and sneer. They were admirable things for the observer, excellent for drawing the veil for men's motive and actions, but for but for it but for the trained reasoner to admit such intrusions into his own delicate and finally adjusted temperament was to introduce a distracting factor which might, through a doubt upon all his mental results. Read in a sensitive instrument or a crack is in one of his own high-power lenses would not be more disturbing than a strong emotion in a nature such as his. And yet there was but one woman to him, and that woman was to Lady Rhinadler of dubious and questionable memory. I had seen a little I had seen little of Holmes lately. My marriage had drifted us away from each other. My own complete happiness and the home-centered interests which rise up around the man who first finds himself master of his own establishment were sufficient to absorb all my attention, while Holmes, who loathed every form of society, which his whole bohemian soul remained in our lodging in Baker Street, borrowing among his old books and alternating from week to week between cocaine and ambition, the drowsiness of the drug, and the fierce energy of his own nature. He was still, as ever, deeply attracted by the study of crime, and occupied his immense faculties and extraordinary powers of observation in following out those clues and clearing up those mysteries which had been abandoned as hopeless by the official police. From time to time, I heard some back account of his doings, of his summons to Odessa in the case of the Trepov murder, of his clearing up for the singular tragedy of the Atkinson brothers at Trincomalee, and finally of the mission which he had accomplished so delicately and successfully for the reigning family of Holland. Beyond these signs of his activity, however, which I merely share with all the readers of the daily press, I knew little of my former friend and companion. One night, it was on the 20th of March, 1888, it was returning from a journey to a patient, for I had now returned to civil practice, when my way led through Baker Street. As I passed the well-remembered door, which must always be associated in my mind with my wooing, and with the dark incidents of the study in scarlet, I was seized with the keen desire to see Holmes again, and to know how he was employing his extraordinary powers. His rooms were brilliantly lit, and even as I looked up, I saw his tall, spare figure pass twice in a dark silhouette against the blind. He was pacing the room swiftly, eagerly, with his head sunk upon his chest and his hands clasped behind him. To me, who knew his every mood and habit, his attitude and manner told their own story. He was at work again. He had risen out of his recreated dreams and was hot upon the scene of some new problems. I rang the bell and was shown up to the chamber which had formerly been in part of my own. His manner was not effusive. It seldom was, but he was glad, I think, to see me. With hardly a word spoken, but with a kindly eye, he waved me to an armchair, threw across his case of cigars, and indicated a spirit case and gas gin in the corner. When he stood before the fire and looked me over in his singular introspective fashion. "What luck suits you?" he remarked. I think. Watson, that you have put on the 7.5 pounds since I saw you." "7," I answered. "Indeed, I should have through a little more, just a trifle more. I fancy, Watson." "And I practice again," I observed. "You did not tell me that you intended to go into harness." "Then how do you know?" "I see it, I deduce it. How do I know that you have been getting yourself very wet lately, and that you have a most clumsy and careless servant girl?" My dear Holmes, said I, "this is too much. You would certainly have been had to leave a few centuries ago. It is true that I had a country welcome Thursday and came home in a dreadful mess, but as I have changed my clothes, I can imagine how you deduce it. As to Mary Jane, she is incorrigible, and my wife has given her notice, but there again I fail to see how you work it out." He chuckled to himself and rubbed his long, nervous hands together. "It is simplicity itself," said he. "My eyes tell me that on the inside of your left shoe, just where the firelight strikes it, the leather is scored by 6 almost parallel cuts. Obviously, they have been caused by someone who has very carelessly scraped round the edges of the sole in order to remove the crusted mud from it. Hence, you see, my double deduction that you had been out in Bill weather, and that you had a particularly malignant boots slitting specimen of the London slavey. As to your practice, if a gentleman walks into my rooms smelling if iodoform with a black mark of nitrate of silver upon his right forefinger and a bulge on the right side of his top hat to show where he has secreted his stethoscope, I must be dull indeed if I do not pronounce him to be an active member of the medical profession." I could not help laughing at the ease with which he explained his process of deduction. "When I hear you give your reasons," I remarked, "the thing always appears to me to be so ridiculously simply that I could easily do it myself. Through at each successive instance of your reasoning, I am a battle until you explain your process, and yet I believe that my eyes are as good as yours." "Quite so," he answered, lighting a cigarette and throwing himself down into an armchair. "You see, but you do not observe. The distinction is clear. For example, you have frequently seen the steps which lead up from the hall into this room." "Frequently." "How often?" "Well, some hundreds of times." "Then how many are there?" "Then how many are there?" "How many? I don't know. I do know." "I don't know." "Quite so. You have not observed, and yet you have seen. That is just my point. Now I know that there are 17 steps because I have both seen and observed. By the way, since you are interested in these little problems and since you are good enough to chronicle one or two of my trifling experiences, you may be interested in this. He threw over a sheet of thick, pink-tinted notepaper which had been laying open upon the table. It came by the last post, said he. Read it aloud. The note was the note was undated and without either signatures or address. There will call upon you tonight at 7:45, it said. A gentleman who desires to consult you upon a matter of the best moment. Your recent services to one of the real houses of Europe have shown that you are one who may safely be trusted with matters which are of an importance which can hardly be exaggerated. This account of you we have from all quarters received. Be in your chamber then at that hour, and do not take it amiss if your visitor wear a mask. This is indeed a mystery, I remarked. What do you imagine that it means? I have not data yet. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories instead of theories to suit facts. But the note itself, what do you deduce from it? I carefully examined the writing and the paper upon which it was written. The man who wrote it was presumably well-to-do, I remarked, endeavoring to imitate my companion's processes. Such paper could not be both under hollow crop pegged. It is peculiarly strong and stiff. Peculiar. That is the very word, said Holmes. It is not an English paper at all. Hold it up to the light. I did so, and saw a large E with a small g, a P and a large G with a small t, woven into the texture of the paper. What do you make of that? Asked Holmes. The name of the maker, no doubt, or his monogram rather. Not at all. The G with the small t stands for Gesellschaft, which is the German for company. It is a customary contraction like our CO. P, of course, stands for papier. Now for the EG, let us glance at our continental gazetteer. He took down a heavy brown volume from his shelves. Iglonis, here we are, area. It is in a German-speaking country, in Bohemia, not far from Karlsbad, remarkable as being the scene of the death of Wallenstein, and for its numerous glass factories and paper mills. Haha, my boy, what do you make of that? His eyes sparkled, and he sent up a great blue triumphant cloud from his cigarette. The paper was made in Bohemia, I said. Precisely, and the man who wrote the note is a German. Do you know the peculiar construction of the sentence? This account of you we have from all quarters received. A Frenchman or Russian could not have written that. It is the German who is so uncourteous to his verbs. It only remains, therefore, to discover that is wanted by his German who writes upon bohemian paper and prefers wearing a mask to showing his face. And here he comes, if I am not mistaken, to resolve all our doubts. As he spoke, there was the sharp sound of horses' hoofs and grating wheels against the curve, followed by a sharp pull of the bell. Holmes whistled. A pair by the sound, said he. Yes, he continued, glancing out of the window. A nice little broad man and a pair of beauties. 150 guineas apiece. There is money in his case. Watson, if there is nothing else. I think that I had better go, Holmes. Not a bit, doctor. Stay where you are. I am lost without my Boswell, and his promises to be interesting. It would be a pity to miss it. But your client, never mind him. I may want your help, and so may he. Here he comes. Sit down in that armchair, doctor, and give us your best attention. A slow and heavy step, which had been heard upon the stairs and in the passage, paused immediately outside the door. Then there was a loud and authoritative tap. Come in, said Holmes. A man entered who could hardly have been less than 6 feet 6 inches by inches in height, with the chest and the limbs of a Hercules. His dress was rich with a richness which would in England be looked upon as akin to bad taste. Heavy bands of astrakhan were slashed across the sleeves and fronts of his double-breasted coat, while the deep blue cloak which was thrown over his shoulder was lined with flame-colored silk and secured at the neck with a brooch which consisted of a single flaming barrel. Boots which extended halfway off in his calves and which were trimmed at the tops with rich brown fur completed the impression of barbaric opulence which was suggested by his whole appearance. He carried a broad-brimmed hat in his hand, while he wore across the upper part of his face, extending down past the cheekbones, a black visor mask, which he had apparently at just that very moment, for his hand was still raised to it as he entered. From the lower part of the face he appeared to be a man of strong character, with a thick, hanging lip and a long, straight chin suggestive of resolution pushed to the length of obstinacy. You have my notes? He asked with a deep, harsh voice and a strongly marked German accent. I told you that I could call. He looked from one to other of us, as if uncertain which to address. Pray take a seat, said Holmes. This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson, who is occasionally good enough to help me in my cases. Whom have I the honor to address? You may address me as Count von Kramen, a Bohemian nobleman. I understand that this gentleman, your friend, is a man of honor and discretion, whom I may trust with a matter of the most extreme importance. If not, I should much prefer to communicate with you alone. I rose to go, but Holmes caught me by the wrist and pushed me back into my chair. It is both or not, said he. You may say before this gentleman anything which you may say to me. You may say before this gentleman anything which you may say to me. The Count shrugged his broad shoulders. The Count shrugged his bowed shoulders. Then I must begin, said he. By binding your both to absolute secrecy for 2 years, at the end of that time the matter will be of no importance. At present it is not too much to say that it is as such weight it may have an influence upon European history. I promise, said Holmes. And I. You will excuse this mask, continued our strange visitor. The august person who employs me wishes his agent to be unknown to you, and I may confess at once that the title by which I have just called him myself is not exactly my own. I was aware of it, said Holmes dryly. The circumstances are of great delicacy, and every precaution has to be taken to account that might grow to be an immense scandal and seriously compromise one of the regent families of Europe. To speak plainly, the matter implicates the great house of Ormstein, hereditary kings of Bohemia. I was also aware of that, murmured Holmes, settling himself down in his armchair and closing his eyes. Our visitor glanced with some apparent surprise at the languid, laughing figure of the man who had been, no doubt, depicted to him as the most incisive reasoner and most energetic agent in Europe. Holmes slowly reopened his eyes and looked impatiently at his gigantic client. If your Majesty would condescend to state your case, he remarked, I should be better able to advise you. The man sprang from his chair and paced up and down the room in uncontrollable agitation. Then, with a gesture of desperation, he tore the mask from his face and hurled it upon the ground. You are right, he cried. I am the king. Why should I attempt to conceal it? Why indeed, murmured Holmes. Your Majesty had not spoken before I was aware that I was addressing Wilhelm Gottsreich Sigismund von Ormstein, Grand Duke of Castelfelstein and hereditary King of Bohemia. But you can understand, said our strange visitor, sitting down once more and passing his hands over his high white forehead. You can understand that I am not accustomed to doing such business in my person. Yet the matter was so delicate that I could not confide to an agent without putting myself in his power. I had come incognito from Prague for the purpose of calling to you. Then pray consultant, said Holmes, shutting his eyes once more. The facts are briefly these. Some 5 years ago, during the lengthy visit to Warsaw, I made the acquaintance of the well-known adventuress Irene Adler. The name is no doubt familiar to you. Kindly look her up in my index, doctor, murmured Holmes without opening his eyes. For many years he had adopted a system of doctrinal paragraphs concerning men and things, so that it was difficult to name a subject or a person in which he could not at once furnish information. In this case, I found her biography sandwiched in between that of a Hebrew rabbi and that of a staff commander who had written a monograph upon the deep sea dishes. Let me see, said Holmes. Born in New Jersey in the year of 1858, Contralto, La Scala, Prima Donna Imperial Opera of Warsaw. Yes, retired from operatic stage. Living in London, quite so. Your Majesty, as I understand, became entangled with this young person, wrote her some compromising letter, and is now desirous of getting those letters back. Precisely so, but how? Was there a secret marriage? No. No legal papers or certificates? No. Then I fail to follow you, Majesty. If this young person should produce her letter blackmailing or other purpose, how is she to prove their authenticity? There is the writing, Popov, forgery, my private note paper stolen, my own seal imitated, my photograph buffed. We were both in the photograph. Oh dear, that is very bad. Your Majesty has indeed committed an indiscretion. I was mad, insane. You had compromised yourself seriously. I was only crown prince then. I was young. I am but 30 now. It must be recovered. We have tried and failed. Your Majesty must pay. It must be bought. She will not sell. Stolen then. 5 attempts have been made. Twice burglar in my paid ransacked her house. Once we diverted her luggage when he traveled. Twice she has been waylaid. There has been no result. No sign of it. Absolutely no. Holmes laughed. It is quite a pretty little problem, said he. But a very serious one to me, returned the king reproachfully. Very indeed. And what does she propose to do with the photograph? To ruin me. But how? I'm about to be married, so I have heard, to Clotilde Lotman von Saxe-Meningen, second daughter of the King of Scandinavia. You may know the strict principles of her family. She is herself the very soul of delicacy. A shadow of a doubt as to my conduct would bring the matter to an end. And Irene Adler threatens to send them the photograph. And she will do it. I know that she will do it. You do not know her, but she has a soul of steel. She has the face of the most beautiful woman and the mind of the most resolute of men. Rather than I should marry another woman, there are no lengths to which she would not go. No. You are sure that she has not sent it yet? I am sure. And why? Because she has said that she would send it on the day when the betrothal was publicly proclaimed. That will be the next Monday. Oh, then we have 3 days yet, said Holmes with a yawn. That is very fortunate, as I have 1 or 2 matters of importance to look into just present. Your Majesty will, of course, stay in London for the present. Certainly you will find me at the Landman under the name of Count von Kram. Then I shall drop you a line to let you know how we progress. Pray do so. I shall be all anxiety. Then as to money, you have carte blanche. Absolutely, I tell you that I would give one of the provinces of my kingdom to have that photograph. And for present expenses, the king took a heavy chamois, laid the bag from under his cloak, and laid it on the table. There are 300 pounds in gold and 700 in notes, he said. Holmes described a receipt upon a sheet of his notebook and handed it to him. A Mademoiselle's address, he asked. Is Briony Lodge, Serpentine Avenue, St. John's Wood. Holmes took a note on him. One another question, said he. Was the photograph a cabinet? It was. Then good night, Your Majesty, and I trust that we shall soon have some good news for you. And good night, Watson, he added, and the wheels of the Royal Brockman rolled down by the streets. If you will be good enough to call tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock, I should like to chat this little matter over with you. 2. At 3 o'clock precisely, I was at Baker Street, but Holmes had not yet returned. The landlady informed me that he had left the house shortly after 8 o'clock in the morning. I sat down beside the fire, however, with the intention of awaiting him, however long he might be. I was already deeply interested in his inquiry, for thought it was surrounded by none of the grim and strange features which were associated with the two crimes which I have already recorded. Still, the nature of the case and the exalted station of his client gave it a character of its own. Indeed, apart from the nature of the investigation which my friend had on hand, there was something in his masterly grasp of a situation and his keen, incisive reasoning which made it a pleasure to me to study his system of work and to follow the quick, subtle methods by which they disentangle the most inextricable mysteries. So accustomed was I to his invariable success that the very possibility of his failing had ceased to enter into my head. It was close upon 4 before the door opened, and a drunk-looking groom, ill-kept and side-whiskered, with an inflamed face and disreputable clothes, walked into the room. Accustomed as I was to my friend's amazing powers in the use of disguises, I had to look 3 times before I was certain that it was indeed he. With a nod, he vanished into the bedroom, whence he emerged in 5 minutes, sweet-suited and respectable as of old. Putting his hands into his pockets, he stretched out his legs in front of the fire and laughed heartily for some minutes. Well, really, he cried, and then choked and laughed again until he was obliged to lie back, limp and helpless in the chair. What is it? It is quite too funny. I am sure you could never guess how I employed my morning, or what I ended by doing. I can imagine, I suppose, that you have been watching the habits, and perhaps the house, of Miss Irene Adler. Quite so, but the sequel was rather unusual. I will tell you, however. I left the house a little after 8 o'clock this morning in the character of a groom out of work. There is a wonderful sympathy and freemasonry among horsey men. Be one of them, and you will know all that there is to know. I soon found Bryony Lodge. It is a bijou villa, which with a garden at the back, but built out in front right up to the road, 2 stories. Chock-block of the door, large sitting room on the right side, well furnished with long windows almost to the floor, and those preposterous English window fasteners which a child could open. Behind there was nothing remarkable, save that the passage window could be reached from the top of the coach house. I walked around it and examined it closely from every point of view, but without noting anything else of interest. I then looked down the street and found, as I expected, that there was a mews in a lane which runs down by one wall of the garden. I lent the ostlers a hand in rubbing down their horses, and received in exchange 2 pence, a glass half, and helped 2 fills of shag tobacco. and as much information as I could desire about Miss Adler, to say nothing of half a dozen other people in the neighborhood in whom I was not in the least interested, but whose biographies I was compelled to listen to. And what of Irene Adler? I asked. Oh, she has turned all the men's heads down in that part. She's the she's dentist thing under the bonnet on his planet. So, say the Serpentine Muse to a man. She lives quietly, sings at concerts, drives out at 5 every day, and returns at 7 sharp for dinner. Seldom goes out at other times except when she sings. Has only one male visitor, but a good deal of him. He's a dark, handsome man, dashing, never calls late than one a day, and often twice. He's Mr. Godfrey Norton of the Inner Temple. See the advantages of cabmen as a confidence. They had driven him along. They had driven him home a dozen times from Serpentine Mews. Gracias. I knew all about him. When I had listened to all they had to tell, I began to walk up and down near Bryony Lodge once more and to think over my plan of campaign. This Godfrey Norton was evidently an important factor in the matter. He was a lawyer. That sounded ominous. What was the relation between them, and that the object of his repeated visits? Was she his client, his friend, or his mistress? If the former, she had probably transferred the photograph to his keeping. If the latter, it was less likely. On the issue of his question depended whether I should continue my work at Bryony Lodge, or turn my invitation to a gentleman's chamber in the Temple. It was a delicate point, and it was widened the field of my inquiry. I feared that I bore you with these details, but I have to let you see my little difficulties. If you are to understand the situation. I am following you closely, I answered. I was still balancing the matter in my mind when a hansom cab drove up to Bright Lodge. A gentleman sprang out. He was a remarkably handsome man, dark, aquiline, and moustache, evidently the man of whom I had heard. He appeared to be a great hurry, shouted in the cabman to wait, and brushed past the maid, who opened the door with the air of a man who was thoroughly at home. He was in the house about half an hour, and I could catch glimpses of him in the windows of the sitting room, pacing up and down, talking excitedly and waving his arms. Of her I could see nothing. Presently he emerged looking even more worried than before. As he stepped up in the cab, he pulled a gold watch from his pocket and looked at it earnestly. Drive like the devil, he shouted, first to Gross and Harkin in Regent Street, and then to the church of the Street Monica in the Edgware Road. Half a guinea if you do it in 20 minutes. Away they went, and I was just wondering whether I should not do well to follow them when up the lane came a neat little landau. The coachman, with his coat only half buttoned and his tie under his ear, while all the tags of his harness were sticking out of the buckles. It hadn't pulled up before she shot out of the hall door and into it. I only caught a glimpse of her at the moment, but she was a lovely woman with a face that a man might die for. The Church of Street Monica Jones, she cried, and held a sovereign if you reach it in 20 minutes. This was quite too good to lose, Watson. I was just balancing whether I should run for it or whether I should perch behind her landau when a cab came through the street. The driver looked twice at such a shabby fare, but I jumped in before he could object. The Church of the Street Monica, said I, and half a sovereign if you reach it in 20 minutes. It was 25 minutes to 12, and of course it was clear enough what was in the wind. My cab drove fast, and I don't think I ever drove faster, but the others were there before us. The cab and the landau with their steaming horses were in front of the door when I arrived. I paid the man and hurried into the church. There was not a soul there save the two whom I had followed, and I supplied clergyman who seemed to be expostulating with them. They were all three standing in the knot in front of the altar. I lumped off the side aisle like any other idler who has dropped into a church. Suddenly, to my surprise, the three at the altar faced round to me, and Godfrey Norton came running as hard as he could towards me. "Thank God," he cried. "You'll do. Come on. Come. Then, what then?" I asked. "Come, man, come. Only 3 minutes, or it won't be legal. Come, man, come. Only 3 minutes, or it won't be legal." I was hauled right up to the altar, and before I knew where I was, I found myself mumbling responses which were whispered in my ear, and vouching for things of which I knew nothing, and generally assisting in the secure tying up of Irene Adler, spinster to Godfrey Norton, bachelor. It was all done in an instant, and there was a gentleman taking me to the one side of the lady and on the other, while the clergyman beamed on me in front. It was the most preposterous position in which I ever found myself in my life, and it was the thought of it that started me laughing just now. It seems that there had been some informality about their license, that the clergyman absolutely refused to marry them without a witness of some sort, and that my lucky appearance saved me the bridegroom from having to sally out into the streets in search of a best man. The bride gave me a sovereign, and I meant to wear it on my watch, on my chain, in memory of the occasion. "This is a very unexpected turn of affairs," said I. "And what then?" "Well, I found my plans very seriously menaced. It looked as if the pair might take an immediate departure, and so necessitate very prompt and energetic measures of my part. At the church door, however, they separated, he driving back to the temple, and she to her own house. I shall drive out in the park at 5 as usual," she said as she left him. I heard not more. They drove away in different directions, and I went off to make my own arrangements. "Which are?" "Some cold beef and glass of beer," he answered, ringing the bell. "I have been too busy to think of food, and I am likely to be busier still this evening. By the way, doctor, I shall want your cooperation." "I shall be delighted." You don't mind breaking the law? Not, not in the least. Not running a chance of arrest? Not in a good cause. Not in a good cause. Oh, the cause is excellent. Then I am your man. I was sure that I might rely on you. I was sure that I might rely on you. But what is it you wish? When Mr. Turner has brought in the tray, I will make it clear to you. Now, he said as he When Mr. Turner has brought in the tray, I will make it clear to you. Now, he said as he turned hungrily on the simple fare that our landlady had provided. I must discuss it while I eat, for I have not much time. It is nearly 5 now. In 2 hours we must be on the scene of action. Miss Irene, or Madame rather, returns from her drive at 7. We must be at Briony Lodge to meet her. And what then? You must leave that to me. I have already arranged what is to occur. There is only one point on which I must insist. You must not interfere, come what may. You understand? I am to be neutral, to do nothing whatever. There will probably be some small unpleasantness. Do not join it. It will end in my being conveyed into the house. 4 or 5 minutes afterwards, the sitting room window will open. You are to station yourself close to that open window. Yes. You are to watch me, for I will be visible to you. Yes. And when I raise my hand, so you will throw into the room what I gave you to throw, and will at the same time raise the cry of fire. You quite follow me? Entirely. It is nothing very formidable, he said, taking a long cigar-shaped roll from his pocket. It is an ordinary plumber's smoke rocket, fitted with a cap at either end to make itself lighting. Your task is confined to that. When you raise your cry of fire, it will be taken up by quite a number of people. You may then walk to the end of the street, and I will rejoin you in 10 minutes. I hope that I have made myself clear. I am to remain neutral, to get near the window to watch you, and at the signal to throw in this object, then to raise the cry of fire, and to wait you at the corner of the street. Precisely. Then you might entirely rely on me. He disappeared into his bedroom and returned in a few minutes in the character of an amiable and simple-minded nonconformist clergyman. His broad black hat, his baggy trousers, his white tie, his sympathetic smile, and general look of peering and benevolent curiosity were such as Mr. John Hare alone could have equaled. It was not merely that Holmes changed his costume. His expression, his manner, his very soul seemed to vary with every fresh part that he assumed. The stage loved a fine actor, even as science lost as a keen reasoner when he became a specialist in crime. It was 6:15 when he left Baker Street, and it still wanted 10 minutes to the hour when we found ourselves in Serpentine Avenue. It was already dusk, and the lamps were just being lighted as we paced up and down in front of Briony Lodge, waiting for the coming on of its occupant. The house was just such as I had pictured it from Sherlock Holmes' succinct description, but the locality appeared to be less private than I expected. On the contrary, for a small street in a quiet neighborhood, it was remarkably animated. There was a group of shabbily dressed men smoking and laughing in a corner, and a scissors grinder with his wheel. Two guardsmen who were flirting with a nurse girl, and several well-dressed young men who were laughing up and down with cigars in their mouths. You see, remarked Holmes, as we paced to and fro in front of the house, this march rather simplifies matters. The photograph becomes a double-edged weapon now. The changes are that she would be as averse to its being seen by Mr. Godfrey Norton as our client is to coming to the eyes of his princess. Now the question is, where are we to find the photograph? Where indeed, it is most unlikely that she carries about with her. It is cabinet size, too large for easy concealment about a woman's dress. She knows that the king is capable of having her waylaid and searched. Two attempts of the sort have already been made. We may take it then that she does not carry about with her. Where then? Her banker of her lawyer, there is that a double possibility, but I am inclined to think neither. Women are naturally secretive and they like to do their own secreting. Why should she hand it over and anyone else? She could trust her own guardianship, but she could not tell that indirect of political influence might be brought to bear upon a businessman. Besides, remember that she had resolved to use it within a few days. It must be where she can lay her hands upon it. It must be in her own house. But it was twice been burgled. Sure, they did not know how to look, but how will you look? I will not look. What then? I will get her to show me. But she will refuse. She will not be able to. But I heard the rumble of wheels. It's her carriage. Now carry out my orders to the letter. As he spoke, the gleam of the slight lights of carriage came round the curve of the avenue. It was a smart little landau which rolled up to the door of Briarley Lodge. As it pulled up, one of the lofting men at the corner dashed forward to open the door in the hope of entering a cupboard, but was elbowed away by another lofter, who had rushed up with the same intention. A fierce quarrel broke out, which was increased by the two guardsmen, who took sides with one of the lodgers, and by the scissors render. Oh no! And the Bisexual Witness, who was equally hot bone. ¿Qué pasó? Aguanta, aguanta, llevo que ver. Sí, acá está. A blow was by the decisive screener, who was equally hot upon the other side. A blow was struck, and in an instant the lady, who had stepped from her carriage, was the center of a little knot of flush and struggling men, who struck savagely at each other with their fists and sticks. Holmes dashed into the crowd to protect the lady, but just as he reached her, he gave a cry and dropped to the ground, with the blood running freely down his face. Oh my God. A fierce quarrel broke out, which was increased by the two guardsmen, who took sides with one of the loungers, and by the decisive Grinder, who was equally hot upon the other side. A blow was struck, and in an instant the lady who had stepped from her carriage was the center of a little knot of flushed and struggling men, who struck savagely at each other with their fists and sticks. Holmes dashed into the crowd to protect the lady, but just as he reached her, he gave a cry and dropped to the ground, with the blood running freely down his face. At his fall, the guardsmen took to their heels in one direction and the loungers in the others, while a number of better dressed people who had watched the scuffle without taking part in it crowded to help the lady and to tend to the injured man. Irene Adler, as I will still call her, had hurried up the steps, but she stood at the top with her superb figure outlined against the lights of the hall, looking back into the street. "Is the poor gentleman much hurt?" she asked. "He is dead," cried several voices. "No, no, there is life of him," shouted another, "but he'll be gone before you can get him to the hospital." "He's a brave fellow," said the woman. "They would have had the lady's purse and watch if it hadn't been for him. They were a gang, and a rough one, too. And he's breathing now. I can't lie on the street. May we bring him in warm?" "Surely, bring him into the sitting room. There is a comfortable sofa. This way, please." Well, it's enough for now. Uh, in the morning, I received a call from a RH agent, from our human resources agent, and she offered me a position of call center. The activities that he suggested to do, he suggested I could do, is to attend phone calls from American customers, from Canadian and England and European customers, and he asked me if I wish to participate in this hiring process, and I told him, okay, let's do it. And the first question he did is was he did was how I been studying English, or how did I learn English. So I tried to explain my methods, or the way that I have, or the way that I used to learn this language. The first answer was that I've been studying for a long time, but I haven't had practice really. I have been watching movies with subtitles in English, or music in English. I've been practicing vocabulary by listening English of Pink Floyd, of the Doors, of Depeche Mode. Then I downloaded the lyrics. Then I downloaded the lyrics from the internet. I printed the lyrics of the songs. Then when I listened to the song, I was reading the lyrics at the same time, and in this way I identified some words the pronunciation, the rhythm, the style of pronunciation. And when I found a word that it was that I couldn't recognize, I immediately checked the dictionary, and then I discovered the meaning of that word in order to get more vocabulary. So for me, it was one of the best ways to learn English because you enjoy listening the song that you most like, and then you practice the language and you learn new words. Other method that I use to learn English is by watching movies, by watching YouTube videos. For example, in YouTube, I follow a YouTuber called Marcela Shemesh. It's a Israelian girl, but she speaks English so clearly, so with a real fluent, and she she speaks English like a native people, but because I see that she really enjoys learning and teaching English and speaking English as a native, and at the same time, and she is so smart, so intelligent, because at the same time that she speak of English, the methods, the way of become more fluent, she get money. She get money. She makes money with her videos on YouTube. Another method that I use to learn English is by recording myself. And shadowing the videos of some YouTubers while they are speaking about some topic. I repeat and try to imitate his pronunciation, his vocabulary, the way of the expression, and in this way, that's how I've been improving and mastering my fluency. And in this way, at the beginning, I got nervous. I started to hesitate. I started to trembling my voice, but as I was speaking, my fluence started to work, and then I felt more comfortable. I felt so secure about myself, and he told me, and at the end of the conversation, he recommended to read at least 1 hour a day in the night, to read out loud and record while I'm reading a book in English. In this way, day by day, he improved and mastered his fluency, his pronunciation, and she found out that it's really possible, because she was rejected at the beginning when she tried to be hired, when he tried to get that job. When he tried to get that job, he was rejected because she has not a really good fluent in English. But but he said that when he practiced the reading and the recording his reading, only the voice, he repeat that method every day, every night, for 1 month, and at the end, he discovered that his fluency was increased, that he became more fluent. He suddenly speak with a total fluency, with total security, and with total happiness. And in this way, that's how he got the job. He was hired, and then he was interviewing me. He was inviting me to participate in this project. This project has to do with customer service, to attend people from the United States, Europe, giving information, helping people, solving some doubts, some problems that these people usually had in the daily basis. So I think this is really necessary to do. There is no need to be practicing 2 or 3 or 5 hours your speaking. Just practice at least 15 minutes or maybe 1 hour of reading, recording yourself, and then see your progress. Well, this is for today. My name is Luis Romero. This is a day of practice. Now it's 12. It's 12 in the night, and I feel really free because I know that I need to. Just what I need is to practice to express myself and to have a better speaking and speak fluent as like a native speaker. Well, this is for today, and bye bye.